Hello, people. How are you? So, Sri Iyer has some very important work. He's been asked by Elon Musk to join the Twitter board. So, we can't really do much, more important things for him to do. So instead, I am going to be hosting the show and I am going to be answering all the questions today. So, can we have the first question, please? Abhishek. Abhijit, sir, what are the global objectives and aims of the Muslim Brotherhood? Is PFI an organ of the Muslim Brotherhood? Why Muslim Brotherhood has not been very successful in coming to power in Egypt? Look, the aims of the Muslim Brotherhood are very simple. It is that all Muslim governments, all Muslim countries need to have their governments based on Islamic principles. Now, of course, you know that these principles very frequently don't work. Just because you run a quote-unquote Islamic government, the interpretation always lies with the human, and the human is always fallible, right? So it doesn't actually work. It's this message of hope that somehow something will always be wrong unless you follow the true Islam. It's been tried. It's been tried in several different places. It just doesn't work. So, for example, they have been successful. They did bring Mohammad Morsi to power as president. He was actually a really decent president. Huh? The problem was that has a sort of, what do we call it, a military business system where the military controls almost everything. So when you start threatening that, you become target number one and you get removed. In a way, Egypt can't be changed the same way Pakistan can't be changed. The military is too deep in. So basically, the Muslim Brotherhood was a reaction against secular Arab nationalism towards Muslim nationalism and Islamic politics, basically. Is PFI an organ? Well, not really. You see, the Muslim Brotherhood works very differently. The PFI has its own set of nefarious designs. They're similar, but they're not the same. Next. Kanda Batata. Are things like Black History Month, Women's History Month also be applied in India? No, please, no. You really shouldn't. All of these things are really, they're just not worth the time. You have histories like you had Twitter handles like True Indology that were doing more without this need for hashtag months and things like that. Next. Arvind Narasimhan. Your opinion on A.S. Dulat's term in Kashmir? Much of his talking points is around corrupting and co-opting leaders in Kashmir as against the hardline policy in place now. So see, Dulat did save Kashmir in a way. The problem is, a tactic is, and he was very successful at corrupting and co-opting them. We have to acknowledge this. The thing is, he is too attached to his own tactic. And once they learned to use that same tactic against you, which was taking money from you, knowing full well you would not shoot them, but Pakistan would shoot you, they neutralized their tactic within about 4 or 5 years. So, he's too attached to what he did because he himself gets attacked for it. He should be attacked for it, but he's too attached to it and he believes that that tactic should continue when it's outlived its usefulness. Therein lies the problem, because it's always a combat of tactics. It's like a virus. You use an antibiotic, the virus mutates and comes back as something else. Next. Mandar Karnik. Is the strategy of banning arms imports, bringing private sector and defense manufacturing and having a stated nuclear first use policy enough against China a good direction for Indian defense? See, first we have a no nuclear first use policy, not a nuclear first use policy. We do not use nuclear weapons first. That's actually a good thing. But bringing in private sector, see, you can bring in the private sector. The problem is, even that is being done very shoddy. You ban arms import. I see a lot of statements, but you're doing nothing new on the ground. I've literally seen companies that have revolutionary products developed in India. The military gives them a runaround for 4 or 5 years. Then, they meet the Americans. The Americans swoop them up in like 1 or 2 months flat. So the whole system has to work. Otherwise, it's no use at all. We're the third highest military spenders in the world, and we have nothing to show for. Next. What is Purushmedha Yagna? What happened exactly in the Ashwamedha Yagna? Very good. Well, the Purushmedha Yagna, there's only one line which says you proceed for it as you do with the Ashwamedha Yagna. The Ashwamedha Yagna, what happened was the horse, you all heard about the horse running around victorious. They don't tell you what happened to the horse after that. Well, the horse used to come back. It was then fed kusha grass, and before it could regurgitate and chew the cud, its stomach would be sliced open. The queen, the second queen, would be made to, there was the first queen and the second queen, or the first, I forget what, would be made to lie inside the horse and simulate copulation with it the whole night. And then, because by the morning the enzymes would have loosened up the meat somewhat. This was a muscular war horse. It wasn't, bred for eating. It would be roasted with ghee, basted with ghee, roasted and eaten. That's pretty much what used to happen. Now, when it says Purushmedha Yagna says that that's what you did with the Purusha, with the human, you figure out what happened. Next. Kapil Gund. Are there any positive results from the meetings with the delegation of Boeing? No. When you say positive results, what specifically, Kapil? Is there, they keep meeting Boeing. You have to tell me what specifically are you talking about. Is there a specific deal or whatever? Next. With proliferation of online dating apps, it is being women have too high standards. 23% of US males are involuntary celibate. Is this a worrying stat and why? No. So, there was this fantastic experiment that was done long back, which basically showed you the more content you grew in society, the more you tended to turn your back on the opposite sex, become extremely hedonistic and self-centered, and fertility rates dropped, cannibalism rose like hell. I forget, it's a very famous experiment. It was done in the 60s or 70s. It was done with rats, but it was duplicated with lots of other species, and all of it came back exactly the same. I think you're seeing that. This is how things happen. It's nothing to worry about. It's a natural course. It's how countries, nature ultimately takes care of you, I guess, by not taking care of you. Next. Was Arab Spring organic or artificially concocted? It wasn't concocted by the Muslim Brotherhood. It was organic in a sense in that wherever it happened, there was a significant demographic surplus of young people. The Stimson Center, in fact, 3-4 years before had predicted it. There were localized things that led to it. So, for example, public anger in Tunisia. In Syria, there was a massive drought, a 3-4 year old drought that had affected the north. Syria is technically a union of Aleppo and Damascus, and the two have always hated each other historically for the last 1,000-2,000 years, whatever. So it wasn't concocted by the Muslim Brotherhood. In different places, it was done by different people that had nothing to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. A lot of it, especially in Egypt, was pushed by the CIA. Why it failed? Well, because if it was too idealistic. Everywhere that you see an idealistic reform movement, nothing comes of idealism. So tell me one idealistic movement that's ever succeeded anywhere. It just doesn't happen. Next. Kapil Gund, what do you think about private firms like SSS Defence? Are they getting their foot in the door to secure? Look, this is the problem. I know a lot of Indian private firms that are very good. They never get their foot in the door with the Indian government. For the rifle, we bought those Sig Sauer carbines, which we have now cancelled the contract after buying 72,000 because apparently the testing wasn't done properly. Everybody knows it's corruption. They pretend it's incompetence when we all know it's corruption. The contract for the AK 203 rifle to be manufactured in Amethi. Do you know we had very good manufacturers in India who were already producing rifles? Demonstrated examples. Okay, but no, they wanted to go in for this. So there is a lot of talk. It's a bit like our foreign policy. There's a lot of talk, but actual action on the ground, zilch, nothing. Because remember, the way the government works is you have an executive and you have a legislature. The reason you have an elected executive to oversee from the legislature to oversee the executive is that they act as a check and balance. It's a human problem. There is this belief that somehow if you get the defense procurement policy right, if you get a document right, all your systems will fall in place. No. The problem is you have third-rate humans across the system. So how are you going to solve that problem? You have corruption across the system. You have zero accountability across the system. And everything gets micromanaged out of the PMO. So no, it's not going to change anything. We have fantastic defense firms at home. They'll just never get recognized. Remember, even the topmost MKU, Mohan Kumar Udyog, they were never recognized by India. They were recognized by everybody else. And when the government suddenly woke up to the fact that an Indian defense company had become a very significant supplier of even armor to the German Navy of all things, where they were famous for their armor, still are. Then, fir jaake defense started giving them contracts. So no. Next. Your thoughts on why India has failed in internal security and cannot pass laws like CAA, Farm Bill for the last 2 years? Well, look, internal security is different from legislative paralysis. Internal security, it's probably because we don't think through the first principles of internal security. We never do go in for preemption or prevention. We always allow things to blow up, mostly for political reasons, but I suspect a lot of it is incompetence as well. I mean, if you think it's being done deliberately, then it's political. If you think, well, it's not being done deliberately, then the assumption is incompetence. And we don't create institutional knowledge to pass on. Okay, when a new commander comes, it's a completely new this thing. There's no systemic absorption of knowledge, lessons learned, things like that. And this is historical. It's not new. We've never learned this for the last 2,000-3,000 years. So it's a cultural thing. And why we cannot pass laws like Farm Bill, CAA, well, we passed it. It's just that we withdrew it. Because when you don't get your first principles of policing, leave alone internal security. I mean, even policing you can't get right. Judiciary you can't get right. Internal security to baat hi chodo. Then you will essentially be held hostage by the street veto. That's how it works. But Amit Shah has said that he is going to implement CAA and it was put on hold only because of COVID. Let's see. Mr. Lee, do you think Home Ministry in India wants to trigger a civil war much more than the lumpen elements to day-to-day gang? No, I don't think they want to trigger it, but they certainly won't be, they're not big picture enough for it. They're very big picture in terms of elections. They're not big picture in terms of anything else. Even in big picture terms, they're very tactical in that, but they're much more strategic, say, compared to the Congress or something. Wants to trigger a civil war. I don't think they want to trigger it, but are they going to fumble into it? Not a civil war, but a significant civil unrest, yes. Next. Abhijeet Mohanty. What is the situation in Ukraine? Any new insights from the victory day in Russia? No new insights per se, but it was a very subdued event and the skies were clear and they claimed that they'd cancelled the fly pass for bad weather, and there was no bad weather. The current situation in Ukraine is very simple. The Ukrainians are hammering the Russians, but the Russians are also hammering the Ukrainians. The Russians have regrouped their strategy, and you can see there's a very significant change in strategy. If you see these days, the images of Russian planes being shot down and helicopters being shot down have reduced significantly. What you see is that drone footage comes in spasms for about a week or so every month, because every time they get a new set of drones, they show you all these images to boost morale, the Ukrainians. And then those drones are shot down. So after 1 week, you see drone imagery no longer coming in. Ultimately, it's, a guerrilla warfare is going to be extremely successful against Russian tactics. We saw this in the first Chechen war. We've seen this with the Yugoslav partisans against the Germans. We've seen this in Afghanistan against the Russians, against everybody. This is not going to be easy. We all thought it was going to be easy. The Israelis said 3 days max. The Germans said 1 day max. They said in 24 hours they're going to be in Kiev. Clearly, we all got it wrong. And, full compliments to the CIA. They trained these people very, very well. They knew what they were doing. And they planned it very, very carefully. Of course, the person stuck in all of this is the Ukrainian civilian, because the Ukrainian government doesn't give a shit about them. The Russians don't give a shit about them. So they're being used as human shields, essentially. That's unfortunately the war. That's how wars are. Neeraj Kulkarni, any long-term positive outcome that will come out of the Prime Minister's Denmark, France? No, Babu. See, remember what happens with visits is you need them to constantly stay in touch. Sometimes overcome. So, look, out of the OECD, out of 140, 150 members in the UN, 40 are very developed. You can maintain a good relationship with them without ever seeing their leader for 10, 12 years. As long as you have extremely engaged bureaucracies. But for the remaining 110 odd countries, you have to go because they take these personal, if you haven't come, it's a personal insult to them, you have to go. Okay, it doesn't change anything, but it removes a lot of baggage and things like that. Fortunately, remember, we have a third-rate bureaucracy. So what happens is even the liaison function between us and Denmark, us and France, us and Germany, isn't carried out very well. So you need a prime ministerial visit to overcome, sort of to compensate for a degrade bureaucracy. So there's no long-term positive outcomes of visits like this. Sachin Sharma, what's your opinion on several states misusing state machinery to target their opponents? Well, look, they all do it. The question is, see, when you say misusing state machinery, there's nothing that Maharashtra did to the Ranas or Assam did to Jignesh Mevani that's illegal. Okay, it's perfectly legal. The problem is that the judiciary itself doesn't prevent misuse. The judiciary is meant to protect the citizen against the state, and all states that have powers tend to misuse their powers. The problem is what Punjab police did, what the Punjab government did was blatantly illegal. It violated, which is why those Punjab cops are under arrest or they're being detained, whatever, I don't know. Because you can't come into another state and exercise, there is such a thing as territoriality. It's the same between, say, India, Pakistan, India, China, India, Burma, India, Sri Lanka. You can't just land up in Colombo tomorrow and arrest somebody. You go, in that case, you have to ask for an extradition. Here, what you do is the police lands up, you go inform the local station carries out the arrest. You do not carry out the arrest. You then go to a court. The court will then accept the transfer and hold it to be valid, legitimate, whatever, and then transfer you. So, see, it's unfortunately, everybody misuses. The BJP doesn't know how to use power. Noticeably, it's Assam. When I say use power, I mean misuse power. The use of power is the misuse of power. Remember that. The only person who seems to know how to use it is in the BJP is Himanta Biswal Sarma, because he is from the Congress. And the Congress guys are, of course, much smarter than the BJP guys generally. Next. Dilip. Taliban are going to keep suppressing women in Afghanistan. Such a radical... how much is still security risk for the world and India? Can ISI turn some faction against India or the world? No, it seems the ISI is on the back foot in Afghanistan at the moment. They never expected to be on the back foot, but they are. Because even their most loyal Paltu Kutta, it turns out the Haqqani network has turned against them. So, can they manage certain things? Small things here and there, sure. But overall, no. As for suppressing women, well, boss, this is what Afghanistan wants. If you read my report that I wrote for Chanakya Forum about this, you'll see that Tajiks across the border in Tajikistan, Uzbeks across the border in Uzbekistan, maybe modern and progressive. On this side of the border, they have no issues with burqa. They support the burqa 100%. Okay, so this isn't some Pashto ethnic whatever. It is in fact what the Pashtuns, Tajiks, Uzbeks, they all seem to kind of agree on, as long as they're Afghan born and residing in Afghanistan. Are they a security risk? They could become a security risk if you refuse to continue engaging with them. Engage with them now and dissipate and create. There is this belief in India and in America too that refusal to engage dissipates the threat. No, it actually makes the threat a lot worse. You should know what your enemy is up to. And if you think they're your enemy, even more reason for you to engage with them. Next. Abhishek. Should IAF and Navy replace all its Russian equipment with American or Western equipment? If yes, what are the difficulties in it? Well, you know, I've been saying this and I'm called a Lockheed Martin ka dalla and Boeing ka dalla and pata nahi kis cheez ka dalla. You're seeing what's happening in Ukraine, no? You're seeing what's happening to Russian armor and things. But remember, even buying American goods or Western equipment, if you use it in a tactically stupid way, a great weapon does not compensate for bad tactics. You saw the German Leopard 2s that were gifted to Turkey going into northern Syria. Right? They were completely destroyed the way you see Russian tanks being destroyed. There is drone footage of that. 8 of them went in, all 8 of them were shot down in no time at all. You've seen what the Hezbollah did to Israeli tanks going in 2006. So remember, it's also about the tactics you use. It's not just the weapons, it's also how you fight with the weapons you have. Of course, having very good weapons that actually work helps you a lot. What we can tell you is that Russian jamming is absolutely stupid. You will not see a heat-seeking missile shoot down an American helicopter like that. You will not see missiles in general being able to take down American planes unless the pilot is very useless. Okay, or does not deploy their logistics in time, or their jamming in time, or their infrared, anti-infrared measures in time. The Russians, I don't know what they're doing. First of all, they're flying low, which means they're not jamming. Second, when you're flying low, remember in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, they'll all talk about the SA-6 missiles, which were shooting them down at high level. Actually, 70% of the Egyptian kills of Israeli planes was done at low level by anti-aircraft guns. Why? Because those Israeli planes would fly low to avoid the SA-6 missiles because they had no countermeasures against them. And it was the Shilka, the ZSU-23 and the 57 that would destroy Israeli planes when they were flying close to the ground. So remember, tactics also matter, and we're seeing shockingly bad tactics by the Russians. I don't know why, but it is what it is. What are your predictions for the upcoming UK elections after the recent scandal of Boris Johnson? My predictions for the upcoming UK elections. Hard to say, boss. This is, they're stuck in a situation where they don't really have a replacement for Boris Johnson. Because Keir Starmer is taking Labour in a way that is smart, but Labour doesn't want to go there. So he's seen as an ineffective leader. You saw the previous guy, what was his name? Jeremy Corbyn was taking them where they did want to go, but that was a losing proposition because they couldn't win votes. Personally, I feel if Labour continues down this path, it's the Tories coming back again with or without Boris. Next. What's your take on today's judgment by the Supreme Court regarding Shaheen Bagh? Great. But did you see the other judgment that they passed for something else? They said you can't keep coming to the Supreme Court for everything, etc., etc. But here they were happy to listen to it. Whatever, man. Like, you never know what the Supreme Court is thinking. Dear Abhijeet, how credible Abhijeet Mohanty? Oh, hi Abhijeet. Abhijeet, how credible are the international indices like press freedom, world happiness? Look, from an academic perspective, they have zero value. I'll honestly tell you they have zero value because, see, they are not actually based on indicators. What they are is a survey of everybody else. Do you know why these indicators came about? There were major shocks that happened. You remember Russian bonds were rated the highest in 1917 till Russia essentially surrendered. And that was a big shock. They were thinking about things on how to have some kind of legal indemnity against bad prediction. And this became particularly acute in 1979, where again, Iranian bonds were extremely highly rated, but the Shah got overthrown, and Khomeini basically decided to renege on all previous loans and things like that. So the bonds became rubbish overnight. Now, what they decided to do was they didn't want to take the risk themselves. So they came up with these indices which would essentially palm off. It was not something you could hold to account, where people would be sacked, but it gave them legal immunity to say, hey, we based it on these reports. It was actually an insurance fraud. That is the origin of all these indices. And you know what these indices do? They are not actually based on any indicators. They decide certain NGOs and certain press that they pre-select. They will go by them, ask them, what do you think? So it's a survey of everybody. And then they can say, well, I'm not the only person that thought so. Everybody thought so. We based our risk assessment based on what everybody thought. So if nobody was able to pick it up on law of averages, it was an unforeseeable risk, and therefore you can't hold us guilty for it. Okay, so it's a fantastic way for, say, Fitch and people like that who do risk ratings to simply palm the buck off onto somebody else who cannot be held accountable. So from an academic perspective, you'll see a lot of academic whitewashing for it from people who are paid to whitewash it or who seek, because, you know, there's been a blurring of lines between policy, academia, activism. When I was growing up, those three were very different things. Activism was, you may or may not understand the shades of gray, but you've taken a position and you're going to hammer on. It's ideological. Academic was purely about understanding the shades of gray. Policy was about understanding the shades of gray, but converting it into a cost-benefit analysis, assigning weights and things to it, to turn shades of gray into black and white. That doesn't happen anymore. So you have a lot of sold-out academics who will actually go validating this crap. Next. Chaitanya G, if China captures chicken neck and cuts off our northeast, they won't. Will Bangladesh help us moving our soldiers and planes through their territory? They won't, even though we've signed a transit agreement. They will not. They might just cut it off during a wartime. And if Bangladesh refuses, will India invade Bangladesh? No, that's exactly what happened. The Kaiser did to. He wanted to invade France, and instead he invaded, because he wanted to outflank them, he invaded from Belgium, and that's what brought everybody else into the war. So no, we won't do that. You just accept certain things. That will not happen, but don't worry, the Chinese aren't capturing the chicken's neck anytime soon. Should India buy into Brazilian Embraer? Well, there's lots of companies to buy into. Embraer is probably not the smartest move right now, because overnight it seems that their planes aren't selling the way they used to once upon a time. They made a big mistake with the Embraer E190, E2, when they knew what Bombardier was coming up with. So the Bombardier C, what was it called? It was called the C300, I think. And it's now the Airbus A220. Bombardier sold the entire program to Airbus, and it's doing really, really well. It's beating them out in the market. But yes, see, you can buy into it. The point is, are you willing to create the regulatory mechanisms? Embraer didn't just come out of thin air. There was a lot of centralized effort that went into making Embraer what it was. There was a lot of economic thinking that went into it, regulatory changes that were brought in to make it successful, etc. Are you willing to do that? No. See, one thing doesn't change everything. That's the issue. It's kind of like when you do accounts. You may be great at depreciation, but what if you're not good at balance sheet or things like that? So that doesn't make you a good accountant. If you are a doctor, assume you're very good at stitching up a wound, but you're not very good at making the wound. You're not very good at diagnosing what's happening inside. You can't be a good thing, right? So it's a combination of lots of these things. So just buying isn't going to change squat. We're halfway through our program, and I wanted to read some important message from Sri Iyer, our friend, our host, who's very shortly going to join Twitter's board as executive vice president of Twitter, he tells me, you see, he's a personal friend of Elon Musk. They're like, yo, Elon, and he's like, yo, man, Sri, kind of thing. So he says, thank you for all the support paid members have been giving us for a long time. Here's a giveaway from us. Oh, this isn't a giveaway from us, it's a giveaway from me. Here's a giveaway from me to all our special members who have been a paid member of our YouTube channel for more than 6 months. I, not Shri, I am giving away the Money series books, 3 of them. You know, we've done reviews of them. So if you go check the playlist, there'll be reviews of those books. Me, Suhail, and Shri reviewing them. 3 of them worth 1,500 rupees or more to all those with 6+ months of membership. Note, this giveaway is only for members living in India, not globally, just in India, or can provide an Indian address. So even if you're not living in India, as long as you have an Indian address that it can be shipped to, it's valid for you. Please ping us with your contact address details and give your membership details and our WhatsApp number. Do this on our WhatsApp number. It's given in the description of the videos, and we will verify that membership and we will send you those books. And you can thank me personally for it. She was against this, but I told him, we need to be doing this. So you can all thank me for it. Remember, I have time for you, but she only has time for Elon Musk. Chaitanya G. Every one of us have bias, yes. How do you make sure that your personal bias does not impact your analysis? Please mention few scenarios where it did. Well, lots of places where it did. You make sure by triangulating. Okay, so what I do is, it's a methodology, and sometimes it can also go wrong. So what you do is, if somebody has confirmed a piece of news for you, you get it confirmed with 2 other people. If 3 people then say yes, then you assume it's more or less accurate. The issue is, it can sometimes go horribly wrong. So for example, when I was in Afghanistan, when I was interviewing troops, Afghan National Army troops, I saw they were extremely well motivated. They were paid well, they had great equipment, they had great morale and training, everything. Nothing prepared me for the way they were just going to melt. And you know, Sushant Sareen went on saying, they're going to melt away, they're going to melt away. And I was like, BCMC, kaise tu bol raha hai, they're going to melt away? You haven't even been to Afghanistan. What are you basing this on? So he's like, I have a feeling. Like, I have facts, you have feelings. Turns out his feelings were right and my facts were wrong. Okay, so what do you call it? I mean, you followed the methodology. Your methodology led you to a personal, was it a bias? I don't even know if it was a bias. Because my personal bias before that was that they're going to melt away. I shared that bias till I went to Afghanistan. Okay, so these things are extremely stochastic. Same thing in Ukraine. You know, if you look at this video I did with Abhinav Prakash in April of 2021, I said, if Biden continues saying the kind of crap he's saying right now, Russia will invade Ukraine. Guarantee. I guaranteed it in April 2021. Yet in February 2022, when Vaibhav from Defensive Offense was, Ajit Bharti from Defensive Offense was interviewing me, I was checking to see what is going to click. What is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back that's going to lead to the invasion? And I couldn't see it. Even now, 3 months in, I still can't see why Putin took this decision. It seems, with the benefit of hindsight even, very stupid. Was that a personal bias? Of course it was. But it also wasn't, because I was talking to people in Moscow, I was talking to people in the Kremlin, they're saying, no, we're not. It turns out it had all been cut out from the decision-making process. Was it personal bias? I don't know. What was personal bias? Was the assumption that they were going to aid in April 21 personal bias, or was it in 2022 personal bias? So are you understanding what I'm saying? So even personal bias doesn't account for it. Your methodology can be spot on. You can be trying really hard to keep out personal bias. And it's still going to be this thing. I'm not going to count my election predictions, because my election predictions aren't my job. I just do election predictions kind of like, some people जाके basketball खेलते हैं, कई लोग जाके table tennis खेलते हैं, मैं election prediction करता हूँ kind of thing. So, it's not, don't take my election predictions very seriously. I'm not good at that. The one thing I was serious about, though, was Bengal, which I got right, incidentally. But that wasn't my prediction. That was somebody else's prediction. That was Upamanyu Bhattacharya. He is a BJP worker on the ground, and he predicted very, very accurately. And I trust him. A lot of what he said I saw on the ground, but it was his prediction, and it turned out to be 100% correct. It wasn't mine, so I can't even take credit for it. But it was personal bias that I believed his prediction over other people's predictions. Hardik Thanki, how much impact did the destruction of Takshashila and Nalanda and other ancient universities on Indian knowledge system? Is one of the reasons we have so little written historical records. No. The reason we have so little historical records is because we wrote on palm leaf, which was not a preservable thing. It disintegrates over time. Also, we didn't archive them. We didn't write them in a way where they were easy to retrieve and read later on. Okay, so we have never been, historically, we've never been good at this. The Egyptians and Greeks have been very good at this because they always used to be doing copies in different parts of the world. They used to have redundancy. They had a fantastic secretarial system which would keep going and getting things back. They also had the benefit of having the same capital over thousands of years. So when Rome was capital for almost 500 years. When Constantinople was the capital, Constantinople remained unsacked, untouched for 700-800 years. So several dynasties, but it was the same thing constantly standing. If you look at Alexandria, Alexandria was the capital of Egypt for 300-400 years at least. Or Thebes or Memphis, they were the capitals of Egypt one way or another, irrespective of the dynasty. The capitals never moved. The geographical locus never moved. So even with the redundancy, there was the localization of data, which was very, very important, that happened out there. Here, who maintained the data? So Maurya Empire has Patliputra, but then after the Maurya Empire disintegrates, is Patliputra the capital anymore? Before that, under the Ajatashatru and Bimbisara, it was Rajagriha which was the capital. So, it's very important to have the same capital, to consistently understand the importance of record keeping and record retrieval. Simply maintaining records is not enough. Archiving them in a way that's easy to refer and retrieve later on is extremely important. You don't find it in the Arthashastra, you don't find it talked about anywhere, yet the Babylonians knew about it, wrote about it. The Egyptians actually wrote about the system of archiving and library keeping. You have Roman and later Byzantine texts that talk about the importance of storing information. There is no such equivalent text. There is a Chinese text about it, several Chinese texts about it. In India, we have never taken it seriously. And it reflects with your archives right now as well, by the way. Next. Ritu Patil. Do you think that wokeism, socialism gaining popularity in the US is also a result of the US swinging so far right economically and the whole woke movement is overcorrection of it? Well, they're not far right economically. It's the wokes are the convenient idiots. See, because what you do is, it's a system that can't deal with rapid replacement. Remember where Microsoft used to be once upon a time and where Microsoft is today. Remember where Apple used to be, tiny, irrelevant at one point of time, and where Apple is today. Look how Nokia has been wiped out of the market. They don't want this kind of change happening. Once they're in a paramount position, they want to insulate themselves. So you bring in wokeism, essentially to keep all managements and innovations under control. When you can't control innovation, you control people. When you control people, you control innovation. There is a reason feudalism and witch hunts and things like that saw to it that Europe produced nothing new for 1,000 years. Okay, so when you introduce that kind of arbitrary, non-rule of law-based cancel culture, life destruction, whatever, it becomes very easy to prevent the next big thing from completely overshadowing you and destroying you, basically preventing what happened to Nokia from happening. So it's part and parcel of, it is not an overcorrection of the economy. It is a tool of the existent big market to prevent the small player from ever coming up again, or technological change from ever disrupting ever again. Malyaban. Hey, is it true that Britain and the US were aware of concentration camps in Nazi Germany and what was going on in those camps but refused to take action? Yes, they did. They did. The earliest was, in fact, the New York Times that found out what was happening. But because Sulzberger, who currently also owns it, but his grandfather or great-grandfather, I forget, wanted to fit in with white Anglo-Saxon Protestant mores, he never reported about it. The news was suppressed. But yes, they knew what was happening. They had very good intelligence on what was happening. Yeah. Divyanshu. Your comments on cancellation of Sig Sauer deal. Can corruption happen under Modi government? It happens all day under the Modi government. See, the problem is, you say na khaunga na khane dunga. Is Modi corrupt? 100% guarantee he's not corrupt. He hasn't taken a single dime. I will give you a written guarantee he's not taken a single dime. Okay. The problem is, has he corrected all the systemic deficiencies? When he says na khaunga, he is correct. Na khane dunga, he thinks he is correct. The problem is he's horribly wrong. Because remember, corruption is a symptom of systemic inefficiencies and imbalances. Unless you correct those, you can't fix corruption. He has not fixed those. In fact, he's made them worse. What is the biggest source of corruption? It's your babus and things like that. And when you make them, you re-empower them to an extent that they've never been re-empowered in the last 30 years. You've actually encouraged the whole system. Now, understand how corruption happens in India. It's very rare, like in the 2G or the coal thing, where it was so blatant, where it was an act of commission. An act of omission is, do you understand the difference? Let me explain it to you. Act of commission is, दिव्यांशु, मैं तेरे को ना मेरे मम्मी से मत बोलियो, मैं तेरे को ये दे दूंगा, तू मेरे को बस 100 रुपए दे और मैं तेरे को ये दे दूंगा, और जब मेरी मम्मी पूछेगी मैं बोलूंगा कि oh, it must have gotten the washing machine ate it up or something. This is an act of commission. Okay, an act of omission is where I say, Divyanshu, I will give you these curtains for 100 rupees, but I don't give it to you immediately. What I do is actually put it into the washing machine, claim it has been destroyed out there, and then give it to you. And I tell my mom, see, these are useless things. They're nothing good. The washing machine has torn them up, so I'm giving them away. One is negligence, which you can't actually prove is corruption. Because as far as my mom thinks, she's like, अरे मेरा बेटा कितना सयाना है, जो पर्दा कोई भी खरीदना नहीं चाहता था, उसको फटा हुआ पर्दा उसने बहुत अच्छे पैसे के लिए बेचा है. You can punish commission, you can't punish omission in India, which is why it is a crime of commission, but an error of omission. It is not considered a crime of omission. Unless you criminalize omission, you are not going to fix the system. Let's look at what happened in the Sig Sauer deal. They said that it was jamming in local conditions, and it was jamming even worse if you used local ammunition. कभी टेस्ट में ये देखा नहीं था. You never tested it with local ammunition. What does that say about your testing? You never tested in local weather conditions. So your entire testing process was so deeply flawed. Tell me one person who has been held guilty of that. Has the selection board been held guilty? Has the man who constituted the selection board been held guilty? Are they even under investigation? Was the joint secretary or the additional secretary or the secretary who signed off on all of this, were they held for anything? No. Are they even under investigation? No. Why, if you're buying 72 plus 72 total of 140,000 units, did you negotiate a technology transfer? No. Why not? 140,000 units is enough for technology transfer, boss. No. But when a commission of inquiry is constituted, they will all come up saying this was negligence, and that is the correct finding. It is negligence. The problem is it's criminal negligence. You've been paid to be negligent. Okay, that is how corruption is done in India. Watch this video. Hi Abhijit Bhaiya, what's your view on the Tata EV cars? Also, how to persuade UP government to get charging stations, at least on Yamuna Expressway. Love you. Thank you. I love you too, I'm sure. You Tata EV cars, look, I'm a big fan of Tata. I'm a big fan of EV generally. I think hydrogen is the next generation, but for now, I think EV is fantastic because it's so cheap per kilometer. It is just incredibly cheap to operate and run. All the problems of excess energy consumption that we saw in the first model Teslas, you remember how much Singapore fined Tesla. They seem to have largely dissipated. Now, how to persuade the UP government? Koi dharna karo, yogi ke ghar ke bahar aur kya kar sakte hain, boss? I think you do have charging stations in UP because my friend had gone for a drive up to Lucknow and they found charging stations. Are you sure there are no charging stations? I'm sure there are. Ask Tata, go to a Tata showroom and ask them for the map and how to search up for it, because when they showed me, I could see lots, and my friend actually did a full electric trip to Lucknow and back. So just check. If not, even then the power charger that you get, you can charge it from any plug point in any motel you stay overnight anyway. So I'm a big fan of Tata EVs. My issue is their software is a bit, their hardware is a bit outdated. That screen and all the tech inside is too less for too much. Too less tech for too much money. Next. Electoral college is always a bad idea, boss. Nothing good ever comes from an electoral college. Terrible idea. It's you're essentially putting your faith in people who you have no idea or clue about to do the right thing. And a system like India, that's the worst thing that can happen. So no. Next. Malyaban. Are the Pakistani military hardware and equipments used by the Army, Navy, Air Force superior to the counterparts in Pakistan and China? It depends. It's not just superior, it's also how they talk to each other. So it depends really from individual to individual. So I'd say the Rafales are way better than anything that both those countries have, including their stealth fighters. The BrahMos, way better. The Poseidon, way better. The Scorpions, submarines, way better. Aircraft carrier, way better. The anti-aircraft missiles on ships and the radars on them, the Israeli MF Star mated to the Barak, way better. The radar aircraft that we use, way better. The drones, the Herons that we use, way better. But do they all talk to each other? No. Can they all operate in unison? No. Can Pakistan operate all its substandard equipment in unison? Yes, they mostly can. So, like I said, it's not just if the individual, it is the cumulative, how things come together. So, for example, remember Hannibal, when he was finally defeated at the Battle of Zama, when the Romans finally defeated him. He had better everything. The problem was that it was all disjointed mercenary units that couldn't communicate with each other. Whereas the Romans learned how to communicate, and that's how Scipio Africanus ultimately defeated Hannibal. So these things matter. Next. Luke Bloke, referring to your tweet, Indian Army was given about 70,000 effective US guns. How can we rely on if US... They weren't low quality weapons, boss. You're not hearing what we just said. They're actually extremely good weapons. Every other country uses them very well. The problem was we didn't test it properly, and you certainly didn't test it with local ammunition. Don't blame other people for your faults. Next. Are we living in George Orwell's not-so-fictional 1984? No, we're not living it, but we're probably getting there, Dash. Yes, we are getting there, ultimately. Yeah, one way or another. Next, which is a good country for LGBT people asylum other than North America or Europe? Is Israel. Israel is not giving you asylum, don't worry. South America not giving you asylum. The best place you can try is probably America. It's the Anglophone countries. Europe, America, that's it. Just trust me. Australia, New Zealand, that's it. Nowhere else. Not even Australia anymore. Just New Zealand. Next. Sukesh Chadha. Why is there such a stark difference when it comes to technology in India? Example, we are one of the world's leaders in the areas of space, whereas when it comes to fighter aircrafts, we're struggling. Well, we're not one of the world leaders in the areas of space. What we're world leaders on is, if you look at the throw weight and the carry weight of all our satellites, they're significantly lower than the Western counterparts. But pound for pound, we make it cheaper. Now, in fighter aircraft, you see, you can make things cheap. We can't. But the main thing there is the differential persists. Now in satellites, it doesn't matter because they're different niches. If you can only carry 20 kilos out to space, there's a market for 20 kilo satellites. The problem with fighter aircrafts is you're competing with everyone against each other. Two launch rockets are not competing against each other in the sense they're never going to go head up. If the Ariane 5 can take 100 kilos and you can only take 20 kilos, all the 20 kilo satellites are going to come to you and say, "Are bhai, tu to humko saste mein bech raha hai, le lete hain." The problem is, in fighter aircraft, if you buy fighters which are only performing at 20% and your neighbor buys something performing at 100%, it's not going to work. No? That's number one. Number two, remember rockets, because the ballistic missile program comes directly under the Prime Minister. Notice how our ballistic missiles have all done well, but our air-to-air, surface-to-air missiles, they haven't done all that well. Even the BrahMos was bought for a very, very specific reason, which was to deliver. It was a redundancy measure for nuclear delivery ultimately. So it used to come directly under the PMO. All the direct under PMO, the nuclear submarines and the ballistic missiles that are for nuclear delivery have done very well. Relatively. Everything that's not has not done well. Okay. Then there's bureaucratic corruption and all of that, plus, of course, classic incompetent corruption masquerading as incompetence and genuine incompetence. Next. Suresh Gupta, hey, why did Persian empires before the Turkic era, like the Sasanian Empire, try to expand westwards instead of eastwards? A very good question. I've never been able to find an answer for that. I think the issue always was, this was a very interesting argument that I heard, which kind of made sense. I've still not decided if it's accurate or not. The thing was that in India, people were largely fighting each other. So we never took pangas that far west. So they didn't take pangas with us. Whereas on their western boundary, there were lots of pangas to be had, which is why they did not bother themselves with campaigns in this side of the towards the east, number one. Number two, having toured there, I can tell you, Iran isn't as inhospitable as a desert it'll see. See, there's the Dasht-e Namak, the Great Salt Desert in between. But if you look at the north, there's a complete arc around it from, say, from Iraq through to Afghanistan. There is a northern fertile arc, which then extends into the oasis into Turan and things. Turan being Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, all those places. It made the logistics a lot easier. Whereas when you come to, say, Sistan wa Balochistan, which is to say Iranian Balochistan, then Balochistan and Sindh, it is a huge desert with almost little to nothing to sustain an army for that long. So they went where the threat was the most and where you had maximum returns for invasion. In the Turkic period, what happens is everybody around you is a Turk. Persia at this time was completely Turkified. So you were fighting against equals, and the only place where you had inferior troops, which was also very rich, was India. So you came in there. So, the Turkification meant that you had to find new lands to go because you wanted a technologically or logistically inferior enemy to fight. So the cost benefit changed completely. This is my theory. I don't have proof for it because I've not dug up the things. This is where I'm going to. Some of it might even prove wrong, because sometimes when you dig up facts on what people were thinking, they're very difficult to come across. See, the primary sources, you don't know what these rulers were thinking. What were they? Because, economics at this point wasn't very well developed. We know they kind of had some kind of economic thought, but did they think of it in such clear terms? It's very hard to establish. So I don't know. And you can very frequently find facts that contradict you completely, but this is my working theory for now. Next, why did the French drop off Project P75I? Because P75I is a joke. You don't understand that a submarine is an extremely integrated, balanced piece of equipment. You want vertical launch tubes, this, that on it, and that too not vertical launch tubes for their missile. You want vertical launch tubes for your missile, which is as it is bigger than the hull diameter of any of those submarines around. So it's not just the French that have dropped out. You understand, everybody has dropped out. Only the Koreans are still running. The Russians dropped out, the Germans dropped out, the Swedes dropped out, the French dropped out. That's how bad your thing is. This is like the infantry combat vehicle. It was such a joke. British Aerospace used to tell me that these buggers basically they wanted to be a tank that can fly in the air and go in the water. And if you read the specs, that's kind of what they wanted. Right? So we're very bad at coming up with these. We don't do a proper technology. This thing, it's all mix, match, cut, paste, and we think we're being very profound. That's why they walked out of it. And this project is going to be cancelled, and it's going to be reframed and take up time. Next. Debasish Chatterjee. Why did 𝙒𝙗𝙗 Tadros do what he did? First praise Modi government and then bring out this damning report. 𝙒𝙗𝙗 Tadros? Who's 𝙒𝙗𝙗? Are you talking about Dr. Dead, Dr. Tedros Gebran of the WHO? Well, look, he's a crook. He's a crook. He's a criminal. He needs to be in jail. He probably needs to be hanged. But this is what Modi does. He's so desperate for validation. You come celebrate him, and then 2 weeks later, there's this report. You would have almost certainly known what the findings of that report are. So it's our shame. What can we do? This is, as I think it was Mihir Sharma, my former colleague at ORF, who used to say that Modi's ego is India's strategic liability. Fact. Next. How potent is Gripen compared to Rafale for its size, Sanket? Very good question. It is just as potent, if not more so in certain cases. Where Rafale wins is double engines and range, where Gripen wins is infrared, tracking to complement its radar, a more advanced radar, a two-way data link with the Meteor. And where the Gripen wins is economically, it's much cheaper. You can probably buy 2 Gripens for the cost of a Rafale when it goes into full production run. So, they win in different ways. They're both equally competent. If they go up against each other, I would not want to bet one on the other, because they can both win hands down using different tactics. Next. Amay Tandon. Aim, why do you criticize Modi ji for economy? Because he's the prime minister. Okay, the buck stops with him. India significantly jumped on ease of doing business index and 100 plus unicorns. Yes, it significantly jumped on ease of doing business index. Remember, we also dropped down very significantly on the world press freedom index. Okay, first, don't take these indices seriously. Like I explained to you, I don't take any of these indices seriously. Go on my timeline. You'll find a lot of shit, me hurling a lot of shit at the press freedom index, but you'll never find me citing the ease of doing business index. The problem is people want you to believe that everything that shows India in a good light is accurate, but the same equally flawed indices that show India in a bad light are somehow foreign conspiracy. They've brought this on themselves. Okay, 100 plus unicorns. Congratulations to you. I'm not seeing where those unicorns are going to go. If you see them going somewhere, fantastic. But I'm not seeing any real technology or value addition out there. Things can happen. So, for example, you see a lot of value in Nykaa. I do not. It's great for making money. The problem here is we make money, we concoct money out of thin air. It's valuation based. It's not actually asset based and things like that. So best of luck. I mean, congrats. It's you believe what you want to. I believe what I want to. And I back it up with what I say, which is that all indices are crap, irrespective. If it says good about India, if it says bad about India, I don't take any of them seriously because I used to work with these indices. So I dealt with them. I used to manipulate them for a living when I worked in academia in Australia. So that's why I don't take them seriously. But that is the end of the program today. We're at the 1 hour mark. Thank you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and just leave a comment for the algorithm down below. Thank you. Good night. Oh yeah, and the pending Q&A we will record in a few days and release the backup. We release it on the backup channel. Okay. Ciao.